Okay, this video I'm just going to hit on a couple stories, two stories internationally that you might not been following since we've only been paying attention to what's going on in the Straits of Hormuz. I mentioned in another video, actually titled it, about the protests in Hong Kong over the extradition bill and the subsequent continued protests in the border cities against the what they call what was the word? What kind of traders? Well, I forget what they were called. But what they did was they came to the border towns. They would buy in bulk. And the traders that were there would supply them in bulk to these certain individuals who would buy everything, go back to mainland China and sell it at a premium and make a ton of money. And the people in Hong Kong that probably didn't like these practices, as it's been destroying the local economy for years, took the opportunity to air their grievances on the back of the protests over the extradition bill. Well, I was reading today, and the protests there have really escalated. In one area, I forget the name of the city now. I have the article here. Yeah. Astonishing scenes in Hong Kong. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So what's been happening, and this just started, is these protests in some of these areas have been inside malls and metro areas where the protesters, the pro-democracy, leave Hong Kong alone protesters, are trying to shut down peacefully, I guess in their minds, business by just crowding everything. So in one of these towns, Yen Long, I'm going to call it Yen Long, spelled like Yen Long, the gate to the railroad, the station has been, it looks like they've been either locked inside or they're protesting in off hours, but all the gates are shut. And what you're seeing in these videos on, and you can find them, just go on Twitter and type in Hong Kong protests, and they come up. Members of the Chinese mob, the Triad, are being dispatched by somebody to Hong Kong and this area, especially in these videos, where Yen Long. Now let me see where Yen Long is, because I don't know this area too much. Yeah, so Yen Long is a town in Hong Kong. I keep forgetting that Hong Kong in general is connected to mainland China, but then there's Hong Kong Island, which is separate, and the other subsequent areas next to it. So the Chinese troops can get there from Sichuan, which is the major city to the north. Not an expert on these areas, but anyway, I didn't even reveal yet, but if you look at these videos on Twitter, you'll find them. These members of the Triad are breaking in to the Metro Center to beat up and scare the pro-democratic protesters. In some of these videos, it's very violent. You know, one of the videos shows people walking up an escalator, and in a big crowd, and these people dressed in white are coming with sticks and stuff, metal bars, and they're beating these people as they go up. I mean, they're not ripping them away. They're cowards, so they're just hitting them and like hurting them around. But reports and the theories are that since China doesn't want to get involved, and send the military and get a bad look internationally, what they're going to do is they're going to make Hong Kong unlivable for the people who live there, make it unattractive for all the reasons that it is attractive, economically and safe to visit and all that fun stuff, a place for financial gain, and just a place that you don't really hear a lot about, but they are under the thumb of the Chinese, and now they're rising up, and this is the first step, is get these guys in there, the thugs, to kind of crack some heads and see who's going to be too afraid to go out and continue to protest. So I just wanted to mention that. I'll link to a couple articles. The one over at Zero Hedge has a bunch of videos from Twitter you guys can check out. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is a story, another geopolitical situation I was not aware of, and I am now. The island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean, really off the coast of Lebanon, south of Turkey, Lebanon and Syria, and south of Turkey. I didn't know that Cyprus, that little island, is split in two, and northern Cyprus is actually the Islamic or Turkish Republic of Cyprus. And there was an invasion in 1974 by Turkey, where they took the north of the island, have been occupying it since, and they drill there for oil, and there's been maritime disputes over land and water access. I didn't know that. I didn't know any of that. Henry Kissinger supported the invasion back in 1974. I guess the United States did too. I guess we're probably getting the oil. It was right around the time when we were getting oil crises elsewhere, especially with Iran and OPEC. And our support for Israel in that time period. So that makes sense. But Cyprus is back in the news, and I've seen flare-ups recently since Syria started and the Turks started entering the news again, that there's been flare-ups on the island, and struggles in the area, but nothing that I followed. But what we see here now is Erdogan has declared that I have my notes here. They will be doing. Well, he didn't declare this, but this is what he declares that he needs to continue to occupy northern Cyprus to protect the Turkish citizens there, or ethnic citizens there, who see the island of Cyprus as their homeland. So, of course, that's the ploy for him to stay there, and reports are that offshore drilling in international waters outside of their zones has begun, and within not just international waters but the Greek Cyprus areas of southern Cyprus, and he's escorting the drillers with warships, F-16s, and drones, and sanctions were actually levied against Turkey, which we know has been in the news for pissing off the United States recently with its purchase of Russian weapons, and it's really been a pariah in the side of the EU and trying to get, and it's NATO really. In Syria, it's been a problem. Turkey's been a problem in Syria, with the United States trying to use the Kurds to carve out a safe zone in northeastern Syria. Turks don't want any Kurds to have any control of anything, so they've been back and forth with the United States there. They've backed militants in the Syrian war. They're backing militants against Haftar in the Libyan war, which might actually fall on the side of the United States right now, but in the future could fall on the side against the United States. And again, pipelines going through Turkey and the battle over who's going to run the natural gas and oil pipelines, the United States and its allies or the Russians, and that puts Turkey square in the middle. There was also the attempted coup a year or two ago against Erdogan, which kind of traced itself back to the United States, where they had a cleric on retainer, I guess, in Virginia, who was cultivating some discontent, let's say, in Turkey at the time. So, back to Cyprus. So, in response to Turkey going ahead and drilling where they're not supposed to be, the EU responded with new sanctions, stating they'll be giving, of course, they're going to cut their funding to Turkey, and they're going to make it harder for them to get loans from the EU bank and other European lending organizations. The Greeks, who I guess control the southern part of Cyprus, are disputing the oil drilling locations, and this is what prompted this international decree. On top of that, the United States is involved. My buddy and my senator in here in New Jersey, criminal Senator Menendez, he's on the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he has put forth, along with others, a new Eastern Mediterranean strategy in response to all this. And this, I'm just going to read the pillars of the plan, and just keep in mind that this is how we treat our friends. This isn't a plan that has anything to do, well, it has everything to do with Turkey and Russia and making sure that this oil doesn't get back to Russia, and the Russians somehow and their Turkish allies are negatively affected. But this is the plan that we are building up, and these plans of actions and the deal they want to make is with the southern Cyprus government, which is our ally, the Greeks. And these are the things we put on the table with people that we supposedly are friends with. And I think what you'll see when I read these, it exposes what I always call, and I always call out, and I always use the proper terminology, about the United States being the empire and the imperial power in the world, and these other little countries really have to do what we say, and we don't even really, like, Menendez isn't he's a war hawk, but he really is just a terrible politician. But he's an American, and he thinks himself better than the rest of them. He's an American U.S. government employee, and when you read this plan, you read it from the side of just a southern Cyprus politician and going, really, like, this is how you're going to treat me? So here's some of the pillars I found within the strategy to deal with this situation. The plan would force the Greek area of Cyprus to stop allowing Russian naval vessels to dock in exchange for protection. So pretty much we're extorting them, saying we'll protect you from the Turks and them just running roughshod over your country, and maybe expanding their control of and the area that they control, as long as you just tell every Russian naval vessel to turn around. That's not an aggressive move at all. Number 2, the U.S. will expand its military occupation in Greek area of Crete and other areas around the Greek islands. And again, Greece is completely in debt to the EU and the World Bank. They're bankrupt, and the United States just comes in and says, all right, well, we're a protection racket, much like a mob, so we'll expand our military presence in your area, and you'll like it, or or we'll leave. They're threatening, when I say they, the United States government is threatening to censor Greek language media in Cyprus and Greece. Yeah, you read that correctly. threatens sanctions on Greek Orthodox churches. And this is all their plan to isolate Russia and Turkey and develop oil and gas infrastructure in southern Europe. So, again, this is all about oil. This is all about carving off more and more and more of Western control over these areas. The U.S., of course, will supply weapons. Of course, we're going to give weapons to Cyprus, but we're not going to cut off our regular shipments of weapons to the Turks either, because why would we do that? This bill or plan goes as far as saying that we're going to give scholarships to students in Cyprus, future leaders, as long as they follow, I'm sure Western demands and Western philosophy, and go to the, American University of Cyprus, where the CIA can tell them how to think. And, again, they can sit on retainer in Virginia until we need them. And, of course, we'll provide military training because, we need to train somebody. So, just another geopolitical thing to follow going on in the Mediterranean. This is not far off from Syria. These are some of the same players as what's going on in the Straits of Hormuz. Just a lot of stuff happening over there. But really, I think the story there is the way that we treat our friends. And, the Turks do something that you can arguably say is bad. And because we're the United States, we can't just say, well, from the goodness of our hearts, we'll send a couple ships over and say, hey, cut it out. Or call Erdogan and say, cut it out. Or don't. Like I would do. No, instead, we use the opportunity to lean on southern Cyprus, which is, I don't even know if it's its own country. It's just barely anything, probably a couple speedboats, and we're going to say, do you want us to protect you? Here are the parameters to our protection. So, it's another story I'll link to, and I'll pop back in on this one periodically. But again, thanks for stopping in. Again, I'll get the whole situation in the background set. Still moving in over here. You got the cat in the last video. So, giving you what I can give you. This video will be posted on the Voluntary Exchange Podcast YouTube channel. It'll also be posted over at the Decentralized News Podcast channel. The audio goes on iTunes once a week, all the audio, and you can listen to it there. I also will be posting to the WordPress, Voluntary Exchange WordPress, and then over on Steemit and Palnet, which are cryptocurrency social media platforms where you can post your content and you can make some money. And we enjoy it over there, over at Information War and Decentralized News, and where you try to do a podcast once a week on just events. We'll try to get one out this week. I'll be covering Iran this week. I'm sure I'll check in on this story and definitely continue to talk about Hong Kong and the protests as they continue. But until next time, have a good night, everybody, and I'll see you this week.